We stand all together, one voice saying yes we can. Each one, reach one till we pull ourselves up, cause we all one fam. From the rest to the block, to the Perry, to the Rock, we connect that love. Cause the people with power feel the power of the people when we stand as one.
I got you stuck off the realness. We be indigenous, you heard of us. Max Heaven, the murderer, spreading the love with the water and earth and the stand against hate. Gotta know what the purpose is. We rise, the climate is changing, the signs of the times. It's time to start praying. Pray for the world and community. Prayers are more powerful when we're in unity.
What I know, we are one. What I know, no, we are one.
Woke up today, hungry for a change, new path to take. Can't stay the same, it's been too long. Pointing out who's right or wrong, can you hear me out? All we need is a little bit of love. Take time to heal and it starts with us. Hand in hand, I put my trust. In one world, reunite, it's a must. Hold on to hope, we can overload. We can break the code with a single note. Sing out for the world to hear that our time is now, no more for tears. I looked into my son's eyes, a new day in a new light. Lift the veil and dwell so peaceful. Come together, one world, one people.
What I know, we are one. What I know, no, we are one. 'Cause who you are is who I am. We all bleed the same blood, yeah.
We got beautiful differences, let me give you a peek. Over 500 tribes, but we all unique. And if we could not compete to eat, nothing could beat us. Jealousy is more dangerous than diabetes. See this unity? Imagine what it looked like. You would think we would do whatever it took, right? I would do anything for this good life. We could do anything if we unite. Come on.
Young native, you are my savior. Say your prayer for our inspiration. From the block to your reservation. Any color, all my relations. From the basement, worldwide invasion. Every day we're painting our faces. Fighting back but learning our language. Dancing our dances, saying our prayers.
What I know, we are one. What I know, no, we are one. We only got one world. We only got one world. We only got one world. Hey. All we got is one voice, one choice, one earth, one love, one birth, one life to live. One life to live, yeah.
One people, we stand all together, one voice saying yes we can. Each one, reach one till we pull ourselves up, cause we all one fam. From the rest to the block, to the Perry, to the Rock, we connect that love. Cause the people with power feel the power of the people when we stand as one.
What I know, we are one. What I know, no, we are one. What I know, we are one. We are one.
Welcome. Emily, if you go ahead and give the acknowledgements, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily Field, and I'm an evaluation specialist here at USET. We respectfully acknowledge that we stand on territories where Indigenous and tribal nations are traditional stewards of the land. Please join us in affirming tribal sovereignty and always displaying respect and gratitude for Indigenous people. We honor and recognize the original peoples of this land. And to learn and acknowledge what tribal nation land you and your organization are standing on, you can go to native-land-.ca/. Next slide. Okay, so a few Zoom participation tips. We are building a community here. I'm so excited. There are just pages and pages and pages of faces. Please introduce yourself in the chat. And let your fellow participants know your name, tribal nation affiliations, job title, and organization. We kind of all want to share and be able to see where we're all coming from. Due to the size of our group this afternoon, we encourage you to use the chat feature for comments and questions. Everyone will be muted until the participation reflections portions towards the end of the hour. During that segment, use the raise my hand icon on Zoom and the host will unmute you to offer your reflection. If you're confused about anything, feel free to private chat or ask a question in the chat to any of us. We suggest you turn off your cell phone and enjoy the hour we developed to support and honor you. Continuing education credits for this January session and this February session will be available for medical and nursing CEUs. And then starting in March, we will also be able to offer continuing education credits for social workers and counselors. And then any other professionals, you can request a certificate of completion to provide your accrediting agency for any of the sessions you attend. And in order to get the continuing education credit, you do have to complete the evaluation at the that you will be guided to at the end of the session. It'll just pop up as a link, and so please go there. And even if you don't want continuing education credits, this is also an opportunity to give us some evaluation feedback. Disclosures: this activity is jointly provided by the United South and Eastern Tribes and Cardia Services. Cardia Services is approved as a provider of nursing continuing professional development by the Montana Nurses Association and accredited approver with distinction by the American Nurses Credentialing Centers Commission on Accreditation. This activity has been planned and implemented in accordance with the accreditation requirements and policies of the California Medical Association through the joint providership of Cardia and the United South and Eastern Tribes. Cardia designates this live web-based training for a maximum of 1 AMA PRA Category 1 credits. So basically, we have really good credits for you. Next slide. Okay, and then there are no relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies for those involved with the ability to control the content of this activity. And completing this activity, you'll get your 1 contact hour. Like I said earlier, you have to complete the online evaluation, which you will only have access to at the end of the hour, so you have to stay here for the whole webinar. And then with that evaluation, you will be submitting your continuing education request. And your certificate will be sent by email. If you have any questions about the continuing education activity, please contact Ms. Natale at knatale@cardiaservices.org. I didn't mention this earlier, but as you're aware, because you have probably had to hit OK, we are being recorded. The recording for this and all of our ECHO webinars will be made available to you following the session, along with the slide deck. And then if you happen to join this Zoom today without actually registering, please take time to register after this session. We are trying to keep a comprehensive list of registration so we can make sure we keep contacting everyone. And I believe that is all I have for you.
Welcome. I am Bernice Jordan. I'm one of the public health program managers here at USET. Good afternoon, all my relatives. Midak kuye agase. On behalf of our USET partners, welcome to our inaugural Behavioral Health Echo, Reclaiming Native Psychological Brilliance. Before we start, I want to introduce Chief Malerba. She is the first female chief of the Mohegan tribe for the Morning Blessing. Chief Malerba became the 18th chief of the Mohegan tribe on August 15, 2020, and is the first female chief in the tribe's modern history. This position is a lifetime appointment made by the tribe's Council of Elders. Prior to becoming chief, she served as a chairwoman of the tribal council and served in tribal governance as executive director of health and human services. So without further ado, Chief Malerba.
Oh, thank you so very much. And, you know, I always feel I'm with my people when I am in a room with healthcare providers and people who are caring for their people. Given my long history in healthcare, I'm honored and blessed to provide this blessing today. And it is a blessing that I've written for caregivers and then translated it into Mohegan. And you'll forgive my reading it, but our tribal language has not been spoken for over a century. So we're working on that. And so I would ask everyone to pray in their own way, but know that I'm always praying for all of our families and all of my brothers and sisters throughout this nation and throughout Indian country. And so without further ado, Kitantuit, Kitapton Tamawiaman, Wachi Yowa Itua Kis Tawami Kishkash Payamax. Kitapton Tamawiaman, Wachi Ta Kawahiyayan, Ombosquigo, Nanawanaman, Utai Wichi Kiawen, Wo Contrimondo, Apawami, Pamkaki Wayotam, Kachashaya Wokanch, Tamai Pomshayak, Wakwitamaman, Wayamanach, Katahash Ta Kanichish. Wo Conchimondu, Wataya Sana Kwakwiak, Nakwati Kanitsi Shawak, Waskichimai Wachi Pomotamawak, Ta Watkik Wayoti Openak. Great Spirit, we thank you for this beautiful day and all the days to follow. We thank you for and recognize the good medicine of the caregivers here with us. We ask that you bless their hearts and hands. May the Great Spirit, who is all the world, bless your families in the path you walk. May the Great Spirit guide us all as we all continue to heal on the trail of life. And may you live in peace. Thank you, and may it be so.
Hi, next I want to introduce Holly Echohawk, the speaker for today's session. She is a former tribal and mainstream behavioral health director for over 35 years experience in mental health and substance abuse treatment services. As an author of Best Tribal Practices, Ms. Echohawk has advised over 100 tribal and indigenous health programs across Indian country and indigenous world. She is a member of the International Initiative for Mental Health Leadership and served as a U.S. co-host for the International Indigenous Mental Health Leadership convening held in Washington, D.C. in 2019. She attended the University of Oklahoma, the University of Texas at Austin, and the California School of Professional Psychology. She earned a Master's of Science degree in Organizational Behavior with the School of Psychology. Ms. Echohawk is an enrolled member of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma and was born and raised in Pawnee, Oklahoma.
Hi, everybody. This is just wonderful. I cannot tell you how happy I am to be here with you all this morning. And I was looking at the registration list the other day, and there are a lot of people on the call who I have known, who I've had the pleasure of visiting and working with. But it's really exciting to see so many people. We know that this topic resonates with all of us. It means a lot, the topic of reclaiming Native psychological brilliance. So let me start by telling you a story. I am no different than hundreds of thousands of Native people all across Indian country. I was born into a tribe. I was raised within a tribe. My mother was a Pawnee. She was a full-blood Pawnee Native. And so was my father. My father was a Pawnee. And I was raised in what I call an old-timey way. And I'm grateful for that. I'm incredibly grateful for that. My grandparents on my mother's side were Native American church people. And I was so lucky that I was, when I was a kid growing up, I was really lucky to travel with them. My grandfather had this old pickup truck, an old Chevy, and I mean old, back in the days when everything was rounded and the bed of the truck was wood. So if we can go, let's see, there's a picture of him I want to share with you. It might be back the other way. I think we jumped ahead here on the slides. There. So there's a picture of my grandfather, who I was raised with. And when I show people this photo, he was born in 1899. People look at me and think, well, that's such an old picture. When were you born? Like 1850? I said, sometimes it feels like I was born in 1850, but that's my grandfather, William Morgan Sr., and he was a Native American church man, and I traveled to peyote meetings with them as a child growing up. And then as I got a little bit older, I was lucky, not always, but sometimes I was able to be one of the cooks to help prepare the food for the morning. They go in and stay in the teepee all night and pray. And it's really quite an incredible religion and belief. But when they eat in the morning, there's only certain things that they can eat. And I remember being part of the women that would prepare that. And my family had a peyote meeting for me when I was 10, which I think is incredibly powerful. And I did the same thing for my only child, my son, whose name is Morgan Echo Hawk Harmon. I did the same thing for him when he was 10. So, a lot of people have known me and they see me and see me in events like this. And some people always say, well, how do you do that? And I always tell them, the way I can do this is I'm not alone. I've never been alone. I have so many people behind me right now that my family, my ancestors, you just can't see them. They're like in a different dimension, but they're all here. They're always with me. So, and I think that's the same for all of you. So I wanted to let you know that I'm part, like many hundreds of thousands of Native people in the country, I too am part of a big family. We have a lot of fun together. A lot of people know my family name, the Echo Hawk side, and we have a huge amount of fun. We always have. We laugh a lot. We tease a lot. The Pawnees have always had our ancient traditions and our language and our songs and our dances, which we call, a lot of them are war dances, and other ancient, very special dances for special purposes. Each dance and song has a purpose. We have a lot of family songs as well, songs for veterans, not unlike a lot of tribes. And the elders were always a big part of how I grew up in Pawnee, Oklahoma. Not just elders, in ceremonies and dances, but so much fun with the Pawnee elders, because we would play stick games. And it would just be so fun to play with them and watch them laugh and tease each other, and to see the brilliance not of just the traditions that get handed down for generation to generation, from generation to generation, whether it's Native American church or songs or stick games None of this is written down, of course, but none of it's changed exactly as it was. And that's another example of brilliance. So I just want to share a little bit about how I was raised. And the other thing I was fortunate to do with my grandparents, and my grandmother was Mamie Morgan, Mamie Grant Morgan. You know, a lot of the old time tribal natives had presidents' names like Ulysses S. Grant, Mamie Grant. There's a ton of examples of tribal people in Pawnee tribes that have presidents, old presidents' names, just kind of odd, but we would visit other tribes. So in that old pickup truck, we would go visit other tribes, usually for a Native American church meeting. And the other thing is that our tribe, we used to be up in Kansas and Nebraska before Oklahoma became, when Oklahoma was an Indian territory. You know, they moved a bunch of tribes by force to the state of Oklahoma. But we've always maintained relationships with our other tribes that we were partners with and friends with and relatives with. For example, the Wichitas that are in Oklahoma now as well. We're the only tribe that my sister was telling me that she knows of, that we've always kept up a visitation. That's what we call it. The Wichitas will come to Pawnee and have a visitation for 2 weeks, and they camp. And then in the other year, the Pawnees will go down to Wichita and do the same. But that's been going on for like eons. The same thing with the Rickaross up in North Dakota. Our languages are similar. We used to all be together before tribes got moved to Oklahoma. The Rickaross stayed up in North Dakota. But when I go up to North Dakota and see a Rickaross people, they call me sister because of our ancient history. And I think that's another example of brilliance, keeping those connections between tribes. I see that a lot with the wonderful East Coast tribes. You know, there's all those old time relationships that it's very brilliant that, and it's natural, it's innate that we keep those relationships up. The last thing I wanted to share with you is I did go to boarding school. I went to Shalaka Indian School with my sister and my younger sister. And I tell you, we were so excited to be only with kids from other tribes all over the country, Indian country. When we grew up in Oklahoma, we only went kind of north and south, you know, to the Plains tribes. But when we went to boarding school, it was the first time we had ever met Alaska Native people, people from the great tribes up in the Northeast, Seminoles from Florida, Native kids from all over. That was the highlight of being in an Indian boarding school. But we were just kids. We were just kids. We were children living together in places that we had never seen before. We've never seen a dormitory. We were living in dormitories. We were eating a way that we never ate before. We saw things that we never saw before, and some things no one should ever see. It was really odd, but I always hang on to the excitement and how happy we were to be in an environment with just other Native children and teenagers. That was the whole reason that we wanted to be there. And so there's some, and you know what I saw there is I saw brilliance. I saw these different kids from different tribes, maybe not academic brilliance because the education was so poor, but I saw brilliance every day in how they talked, how they told stories, how they strategically figured out how to achieve things under the most horrible circumstances. But I saw brilliance all the time. So I wanted to share a little bit about my background with you, because in 35 years and in my entire life, I've seen things. I've seen joy. I've seen death. I've seen laughter. I've seen brilliant strategic thinking from Native people. And I've seen the worst of tragedies, just like hundreds of thousands of Native people across the country, and maybe some of you, I'm sure. I've seen wars amongst other tribes. That was not uncommon in boarding school, that some tribes didn't get along with other tribes. And so there were these little wars that happened. But I've also seen incredible togetherness of tribes. So I've seen things. I want to share a lot with you over this next year through this series. But as an adult in the field of mental health and behavioral health, and by the way, most people don't know what, including myself when I first started, behavioral health is such a weird term. So is mental health, actually. Most people don't know what behavioral health means. I always prefer to flip words around. So instead of behavioral health, to me, it means healthy behavior. What do you do? What strategies do you use? What intentional resilience do you use to be healthy, to be in balance, to have healthy behavior? That's what behavioral health means to me. And it means, I think about a lot about what motivates Native people, what triggers us emotionally that moves us either toward healthy behavior or away from a healthy lifestyle. But there's one thing, in spite of all of this, this short story I'm telling you, that I've seen is brilliance. I see Native brilliance everywhere. Everywhere I've traveled across Indian country, I've seen it in the daytime, I've seen it at night, I've seen it in rain, I've seen it in snow. I see Native brilliance everywhere. And I think that it's time we reclaim it. It's time we maximize the innate brilliance that we have. So if you can click and go to the next slide, one click, please, Brian. So this is what I've seen, and this is what I believe. So one more click, Brian, please. This is my mantra. And anyone who knows me has heard me say this before many times. All Native children are brilliant. They're born brilliant. It's innate in all Native children. It's in our DNA. All Native children are brilliant. I believe in that so much that I had it printed on the back of my business card. All Native children are brilliant, period. No question. What happens though is, if you can click to the next slide, I think, is what happens is brilliance can get squashed down. But before I do that, I wanted to show you a couple of examples and definitions of native brilliance defined. So if you can click one more time, please. So when we developed this new ECHO series for all of 2022, the team and USET, we came up with a definition of native brilliance, which is that native brilliance refers to the innate intelligence, means that we're born with it. We have indigenous intelligence and the balance in resources and resilience by acknowledging strengths of Native people. There's another native brilliance definition I want to share with you. And if you can click one more time, Brian. It's by the indigenous group. So indigenous, they defined, it's the Native Scholarship Program that was, came out of the Eloise Cobell settlement with the federal government. And a big chunk of that money went to develop the Cobell Scholarship Program. So they have this thing called Indigenious. Love it. Love that word, Indigenious. So they define it as an individual, collective, or a movement who through natural ability, there you go again, innate, it's in our DNA. We are brilliant, period. And it inspires others in innovation and creation by expressing one's traditional and cultural knowledge to advance community. And then the next slide. So I just want to say something about, we are completely strength-based. We don't want to dwell on negative, sometimes overly used negative approaches. But I did just want to say that I know that Native brilliance can be squashed. Native children are born brilliant. They're born blessed. There are very few people in the world who have the DNA that we have. But social conditions can squash that brilliance down and squash the confidence down, especially in children. And that is some terrible things like that we've all experienced. Racism, systemic oppression. Sometimes we're don't even know we're oppressed because it's been going on for so long. It's almost, seems normal that, people think they have limitations in what they can do. Trauma experience and the constant negative messaging that's out in the public about Native people. And the flip of that, which is also really bad, is the absence of information about Native people, the absence of the brilliance of Native people. So those are some of the things that can squash down these innate brilliance that Native young people have. But it's our job and your job, that's why we're all doing the work that we do, is to try to lift that up and let that Native brilliance that's in young people come out and maximize. So the next slide, and I just have about 5 minutes left here. So we can declare Native brilliance and we can cultivate it. And whether you're a young person, whether you're middle-aged, doesn't matter. It can be declared, and that's what we're going to do. We are now seizing control of the brilliant minds of Native people, and we are declaring it to be so. And we can cultivate it. We can assume strengths, we can model behavior, we can do all these things that are in here in this bullet list, but we can most importantly create a safe place for brilliance to grow. And it's in us already. So the next slide. So this is kind of a question. Did you know that historical trauma is actually historical resilience? I really prefer to see it as historical resilience. And then the next slide. So I want to show you just this one quick thing, and we're going to talk about it a lot in this series over 2022. Indigenous thought has always influenced modern science, always. And so one of the things that's very clear is that and becoming clearer every day in the total world on this planet Earth, Western hierarchy of thought is not sustainable. And that's an image of man on top. Man controls woman, even though you can see the little woman there on the bottom, on the left, and animals and land and everything. That's basically Western thought. And then click one more time, please, Brian. But the world is turning, as it always has, back to Indigenous thought. And then just one more click for this image. And that is, man is part of planet Earth. Man is equal to any animal. Man, it's a very different world view. But one of the things that happens, and I'll say this really quickly, and we're going to talk a lot more about it in future monthly sessions. We have a real challenge as health providers and behavioral health folks, because what Western thought influences science. Science influences training. Training influences credentials. And so here we sit with different kinds of education and training that we have, but it's from a Western perspective. So what we have to do, and this is another example of our brilliance, we have to, it's almost like, you know, people who are native speakers and and English is their second language. It's really hard for them, and they become very brilliant in it, but they have to take something that's spoken to them in a different language, process it through their brain, turn it around into their native language, formulate their response, and then say it back out in English. So they're going through at lightning speed all of these steps. It's the same thing with what we have to do as credentialed people, is we have to decolonize, in a sense, what we have learned and take the best of it that makes sense, but really get back to a native perspective. So, you know what they always say about maybe you guys don't know this, but because it's old, the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, you know, and they're famous dancers, you know, back in the day. But everybody, Fred Astaire got all the attention, right? You don't hear that much about Ginger Rogers, but they always say that she did everything, was as talented as dancer as Fred Astaire was, only she did it backwards. That's sort of, to me, an analogy of the way I think about our work in behavioral health, is that as Native people, we're like the Ginger Rogers. You know, we have to do all that processing, decolonizing, unscrambling, lightning speed, and then be able to speak about it instantly. And no one knows we're going through all of that process. Brilliant. Okay, next slide, and we're just about done here. So we have this series all year. We hope you join us every month. Same time, fourth Tuesday of every month. It's all Native driven. Our partners were Indian Health Service, C4 Innovations, and the New England MHTTC, which I am part of. We have this great series. We developed the Native Brilliance banner, and you can go to the next slide real quick. Those are the topics for the next rest of the year, and you can look at them later. And then the next slide is, so this is the final thought that I have. So I referenced in Indigenous Eloise Cobell, a fabulous woman who took on the federal government on behalf of over 300,000 Native people because the federal government is totally mismanaged and cheated. You know, of course, what a shock. Native people and their property and their land rights and mineral rights and all of that. And then, but after she passed away in 2011, this thing was taped to her computer. Little message, and you can click one more time, Brian. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. That's what we're going to do this year with this series. So then one more slide. So reclaiming Native psychological brilliance, winning. And then the next slide, I think we're going to show you an example of one more slide. We're going to show you an example of brilliance. It's called Why.
Haya wana hawene yo wa. Haya wana hawene. Haya wana hawene yo wa. Haya wana hawene. Haya wana hawene yo wa. Haya wana hawene. I don't want no Hawaii, yo.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii, yo. Why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii, yo. Why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii, yo. Why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii, yo.
Why is there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why, the night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why, and why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why, and why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why, and why, and why, and why, and why, and why?
I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii, yo. Why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii, yo. Why? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii, yo. Why? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii, yo. Why?
Such a great example of brilliance. To dance is to pray. And many of you have seen Christian Parrish, Christian Takes a Gun Parrish, whose professional name is Superman, just brilliant. So I think the next slide, we're going into one thing. That's the banner we created. USET fabulous communications team, shout out to them, it's fabulous. And then the next slide is, I think it's going to Lydia.
All right, well, thank you so much. That was amazing. I am Livia Davis. I am with C4 Innovations. I am so happy to be part of this series with Holly and USET and all of you. So what we're going to do for the next couple of minutes, we're going to do some interactive chatting in the chat box. But before we get there, and I just set the tone, I just want to make sure you know who is in front of you. Again, my name is Livia Davis. I am originally from Denmark. So if you hear an accent, that's what that is. And I live in Maine, and working with a number of you on this call has been a great privilege. We are so pleased that so many have decided to join this series. And we're so pleased that this is a kickoff and the first in many to come. We want to take the next couple of minutes to really give you an opportunity to comment on how Holly's presentations resonated with you. We would love for you to use the chat box to share any examples of native psychological brilliance that you are thinking of or that you could share with us. And we hope that you put your reflections in the chat box. So this is where we hope you will start seeing a lot of chatter in the chat box. And then what we will do, we are hoping that a couple of you might want to raise your hand. You know, as Emily said early on, you can use the raise your hand icon, and we might call on a couple of people, because this is the time for us to be interactive. And I hope to see some chats. All right. I see one raised hand. We can share verbally while some of you others you can write right in the chat box. Maybe we can have our producer on mute Patricia Pina.
Hi, I'm Patricia Pena from Kickapoo Tribe in Kansas, and I'm an RA supervisor at the Sacred Oaks Healing Center for Native youth ages 12 to 17. And we are located in Davis, California. The tribes put this together and rallied the Indian Health Service to create it because it's so necessary. And the Native Brilliance is a prime example of how we want to model our children when they come through these doors and stay with us for a 4-month residential program. We use cultural identity as one of the most powerful tools. And, I'm just really happy that we're able to join this. I'm going to make sure that the people who will be working with our kids, once we all become approved, as in our background checks, I'm approved, and there's just a few more that are, but I'll make sure that they participate in this in preparation for that time that we do have the kids here. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Holly. And are you related to Bunky? Of course.
Usually people say, are you? And I say, yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, he is one of my favorite artists because of his messages, the propaganda art. I think it's just brilliant. And I've, been able to support his work. And I think that his artwork is important for this whole facility that we have. So I'm really rallying to bring his artwork here for the kids. And again, I would like to give my condolences, for the loss of his beautiful daughter. But thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Patricia. There's a lot of other comments coming in. I see there are some aha moments that people are sharing. They love some of the reframing of some of the paradigms that we're used to. I saw one saying, really looking at youth at promise rather than youth at risk. It's a beautiful reframing. I love there's some people who really like the idea about thinking about healthy behaviors, what moves you towards healthy behaviors rather than behavior health. Let's see, what else resonates with you? There is, Gloria, I see that you really were struck by the reframe from trauma to resilience, and that is beautiful. And if you look at that, just that alone as something to take away from this as we get going in our series and our time together could be very powerful. Anyone else have anything they want to share verbally? And, any with your hands, you could please feel free to raise your hand with the icon. All right. Roberta, I see that you have raised your hand, hoping we can unmute you.
Yeah. What resonated with me was the science influencing Western thought, and that's what recently happened with me, was trying to bring a drum group into my groups because I'm a substance use disorder counselor, but then having a manager who is not Native going with a non-Native drum facilitators guild and wanting it to be non-cultural. So I thought there were so many different aspects of culture that we could bring into such a group that it's not really evidence-based, but we know it works because it's kept us healthy for thousands of years. So, I mean, I would really think, like to think that that this is true, that we're moving towards appreciating Indigenous knowledge, and that we could incorporate that more, as well as what we consider to be evidence-based, that sometimes it's, even though they say it's non-cultural, they're still using African drums, and that's cultural, that's somebody's culture. So I guess there's hope, I like that ignore, laugh, fight, and then you win. I don't really want to fight. We're trained in our culture not to fight about those kind of things, and I was kind of thinking of being more like allowing that to play itself out, and then maybe finding a place for what my vision is. But this is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Roberta. I just wanted to say that when that quote from Eloise Cobell, I think she was talking about the federal government, that was the federal government's response to her in this lawsuit. And in future sessions, we're going to talk a lot about how the worldview differences between Western science and Native thought, and how that plays out, and how we can decolonize that in our behavioral health work. So we're going to talk a lot about that in future sessions.
Great. I love how much is going into the chat box right now. Please keep them coming. We're going to use this and for our future sessions as well. And it's so good to have this information. We'll share it. We'll take one more and then I'll turn it over to Ken. Shara Giles, I don't know if I said your name right. I'm sorry, my Danish tongue, you sometimes can't get it quite right. So apologies, but love to hear from you.
No problem. Thank you. Yes, it's Cher Giles. I am Hische. I'm Muskogee Creek and Cherokee. I live in Northern Virginia, but originally from Oklahoma. And I am a licensed master social worker, currently working for Tribal Tech on a contract with the BIE Behavioral Health and Wellness Program. And so thinking about Native brilliance, and I just love that term and that word. We don't hear it enough. We don't share it enough to just innately, this is who we are as people, and even as older people and for our younger people, that it carries and transcends across all those generations. But especially during this time of COVID, it really opened that door to say, here's the narrative, here's where we've been living, this is how we've been living anyway, but how do we connect now in this virtual world and in this time of flux of, are we in person, are we virtual? And the program I'm currently working for is doing just that, saying, okay, now how are we going to connect with students that aren't able to return to school, that the reservations are closed or tribal lands are closed, and how are we going to be able to provide services to them? So allowing that to have access to mental health services via Zoom and all these other platforms. Another way to connect and still be readily available is one way. And then just how tribes have responded and tribal communities have rallied around those that don't have access, whether it's to vaccinations, to masks, to just education materials, to the services they desperately need. And so just the way our communities have been able to pivot and stop and say, okay, we know how to do this. And we just do it. And sometimes, policies and regulations, all those things have to catch up to what we're already doing. We know how to take care of our people and take care of each other. But to get the funding and to get the access to it and get it out to everybody is where we need that additional support. So I just think the work, and all of you here that are on this webinar, and I appreciate the work you're doing. When I saw this come across on Facebook, I'm like, how did I not hear about this before? We need to all keep connecting and sharing our information and connecting in other ways, because Indian country is really, really small but can feel very isolating sometimes, especially during this time of COVID. So just honored to be able to be a part and hear from others and hear from Holly. Thank you for sharing your story and for this work. It's desperately needed, and for us to keep pushing this narrative forward and pushing that information. Again, that Indigenous thought, everything we hear is, here's your funding, but you got to do it this way, and you got to meet all these boxes and check here, and here, versus saying, you know how to do it, here, go do it, just take care of things. And having that accountability, and understand has to be there, but just having that narrative that we're all here pushing that we've got in, we you know, we're taught to go out in the world, you learn that way, but how do you make it indigenous? How do we make it back to our communities, and how do we share what our communities have back out into the world? So I just appreciate everyone's time and everyone sharing. So I just wanted to share that from my little piece of the world. So Mado, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. Did you
Well,
want to say something?
I just want to say, Cher, that we're doing some follow-up in addition to this series, which you have the schedule. In February, Dr. Jeff King, who's also Muskogee Creek, and I are doing a 2-hour presentation just on the kind of more of the clinical aspects of this topic. So if it's not in the chat, we'll try to get a list of some other, in addition to this, there's a few other things that are happening as well through UCLA and the Northwest Portland area and Health Board, our other sister organization partners. So we'll keep you posted. We'll communicate with you.
Well, thank you so much for all your contributions. Please keep them coming. Just so excited. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ken Cravel.
Olivia, thank you. Thank you all. My spirit is full as I've been listening to all of this, and I feel bereft of having anything really to share other than one of the quotes, and I love quotes, that came to me as we were all talking with one another is something that comes from Wayne Dyer, and I'm going to change it a little bit. But he says, if you change the way you look at people, the people you look at change. And certainly as a person who identifies as white, comes from white dominant culture, the way I've been taught to look at people, indigenous people, people of color, is not at all the way I want to look at them, but I realize I have a lot of unlearning to do. And so one way we unlearn, though, is we reframe things. And what beautiful reframes have come out of all of this. And I'm so grateful for that. The only other thing I'm going to say is actually to quote one of you, and it's Kelly Bird Natalhau. You know, one part of what you said is the undercurrents that drive our teachings derive from our ceremonies. Spirit always first. And that really struck me when you said spirit always first. I truly believe that's the case. And I truly believe that spirit is really based on ancient wisdom that indigenous people, probably more than many, have been able to keep alive and to grow and feed. And yes, it's been squelched, and yet it has continued to grow. And there's something in the trauma literature that we call post-traumatic growth. And I'm just going to use that term as another reframe of talking about post-traumatic stress that can be turned into post-traumatic growth. And that's, in part at least, what I see emerging in this presentation and in our ways of focusing in on brilliance. So that's all I've got for the moment.
That's great, Ken. I really am just kind of positively overwhelmed by all of the comments, and I'm so happy to see people again and meet new people. But I wondered if, I don't know if Greg Donovan is on or not, but some of my old friends in Nebraska from the Society of Care. And Greg, I don't know if you're on or still on. I know some people kind of might have to leave, but if you are on and have any comments you want to share, we'd love to hear them.
I am here, and I appreciate your reaching out. I've just been in awe all session and think that this is really powerful and needed. So I appreciate everything that you've done, and thank you for your work with us as well.
And the Society of Care and the work that Greg and his team, including Anitra, Dr. Anitra Warrior, who is, I believe she is a Ponca Indian native. She's close to, Ponca's close to Pawnee in Oklahoma. They've done incredible work over the years, Greg, and really, I've always saw you all as in the work you do and your team with working with tribes in Nebraska kind of always seeing that brilliance in young Native people. And I just had so much respect for what you do, and so many others on the call as well. But it was nice to see Greg, and I don't know if any of your team are on the call, but thank you for those comments, Greg.
Thank you. And I noticed that Lucinda Mestet, our assistant director, who does a lot of work directly with very talented young people, some of whose talents may not have come to fruition yet, but who have it innately within them, is also on this meeting and chimed in, reinforcing what you said about Dr. Warrior. So thank you.
Great. Let me just close because looks like we have 1 minute left before we end, and your time is precious. Next month, we're going to focus on Native youth and brilliance. Every 1 hour, every month, we always will include Native videos, Native spoken word. So we don't want to just be talking heads. So just want to remind you that the next month be on February 22nd, same time, same channel. Come back and join us for a focus on Native youth. And thank you all again for participating. It's so wonderful to see you. We will go through all the comments. We'll go through an analysis of looking at where everybody was from. There'll be some follow-up that'll go out to you, I think, tomorrow. And yes, you will receive a copy of this PowerPoint. I believe you will receive that tomorrow as well. So anything else, Bernice, to close? Did I miss anything?
No, I just want to say thanks everybody for coming. It has been a pleasure working with this group of people to get this started. And it is our pleasure, with as far as USET is concerned, that we are able to get this launched. So thanks everybody, from the blessing all the way to Holly and Ken and Liv and everybody else that's on this call. Thank you guys for joining, and hope to see you guys next month. Do not forget to register.
Please remember to do your surveys at the close. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, USET, Ken, Livia, all the participants. Be safe. See you next month.